The wind that moved across the Montana plains in November of 1890 carried the smell of coming snow. It whispered through the pine trees surrounding the cabin, where Silas Brennan sat on a rough-hewn porch watching his grandson pack a leather satchel with the careful precision of a young man preparing for a journey that might change everything. Joshua was 19 years old, tall and lean, like his grandfather had been at that age, with the same blue eyes that could see clear to the horizon. Tomorrow morning, he would board the train to Denver. 3 days after that, he would walk through the doors of St. Thomas Seminary and begin his studies for the priesthood. His mother, Silas's daughter, believed this was God's calling. His father thought it was a fine and respectable path. But Silas saw something else in those blue eyes. He saw the same haunted look he had carried for 3 decades. The look of a man who could not sleep because the ghosts were too loud. The old man shifted in his chair, feeling the familiar ache in his left shoulder, where a bullet had passed through 32 years ago. The scar was a white pucker of tissue now, but on cold nights it still spoke to him in the language of old violence. "Come sit with me, boy," Silas said. Joshua looked up from his packing, surprised. His grandfather was not a man who asked for company. He was not a man who spoke much at all. The ranch hands said he was the quietest employer they had ever known, a man who could work from sunrise to sunset without saying more than a handful of words. But Joshua came. He sat on the step below the porch, his long legs stretched out, his hands hanging loose between his knees. The silence stretched between them like a rope being pulled taut. "You think you are ready for this," Silas said finally. It was not a question. "I am ready, grandfather." "You think God is calling you?" Joshua hesitated. I think I need to serve something bigger than myself." Silas nodded slowly. He pulled a pipe from his pocket but did not light it, just turned it over in his weathered hands, feeling the smooth bowl worn by years of use. "You're running," Silas said. The boy flinched as if struck. His face went pale in the fading light. "I don't know what you mean." "Emily," Silas said quietly, "the girl who drowned, you were there." Joshua's throat worked. His eyes were suddenly bright with tears he had been holding back for 3 months. Since August, when Emily Harper had gone into the river to cool off on a blazing afternoon and never come back up. Joshua had been on the bank. He had seen her go under. He had frozen paralyzed by fear of the current, and by the time he found the courage to dive in, it was too late. "I should have saved her," Joshua whispered. "I should have jumped in right away. I froze. And now you think becoming a priest will wash that away?" "I don't know. I just know I can't keep living with it. Every night I see her face. Every night I hear the water." Silas was quiet for a long moment. Then he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Before you go meet God," Silas said, "let me tell you about the time I met his judgment." Joshua looked up confused. His grandfather never spoke about his past, never spoke about the years before he had settled in Montana, before he had married Joshua's grandmother Abigail and built this ranch from nothing. "I was 32 years old." Silas began, his voice taking on a distant quality, as if he were seeing through the present into a past that still breathed and bled. "Younger than I am now by a lifetime. I had been living in the Rocky Mountains for 12 years, trapping beaver and hunting elk. I was good at being alone. I preferred it after Margaret died. Margaret, my first wife, she died in childbirth, the baby with her. I buried them both on a hill overlooking our cabin, and I thought I would go mad from the silence." The old man's hands tightened on the pipe. "That silence made me reckless. Made me take jobs I shouldn't have taken. Made me willing to do things for money that a man with a soul intact would have refused." He looked at Joshua directly then, and the boy saw something in his grandfather's eyes that made him go still. It was not regret. It was deeper than that. It was the look of a man who had walked through fire and come out the other side scarred beyond recognition. "This is the story of how I became a murderer," Silas said, "and how a woman who should have killed me chose to save me instead." The sun was sinking behind the mountains, now painting the sky in shades of copper and blood. Silas Brennan took a breath that seemed to come from the bottom of a very deep well, and he began to speak. The Colorado Rockies in the summer of 1858 were a cathedral of stone and sky. The peaks rose 10,000 feet and higher, their shoulders draped in forests of pine and aspen, their heads crowned with snow that never melted. The air at that altitude was thin and clean, so pure it hurt to breathe too deeply. The streams ran cold and clear, filled with trout that flashed silver in the sunlight. Eagles circled overhead on thermals that rose from the heated valleys, and at night the stars were so thick they looked like someone had flung diamonds across black velvet. Silas Brennan knew every canyon and ridge for 100 miles. He knew where the elk came down to water at dawn. He knew which passes would be choked with snow until July, and which caves offered shelter from sudden storms. He knew the land the way a sailor knows the sea, with an intimacy born of 12 years spent learning its moods and respecting its power. He had come to the mountains after Margaret died, driven by a grief that made civilized life unbearable. In the wilderness, a man could scream and no one would hear. A man could weep and the only witnesses were the ravens. A man could work himself to exhaustion, every day setting traps and skinning pelts and hauling meat and fall asleep too tired to dream. But grief was expensive. It ate through a man's savings like rust through iron. By the early summer of 1858, Silas was down to his last $20 in gold. His cabin needed a new roof. His traps needed replacing. His rifle needed repair. He needed supplies for the coming winter or he would not survive it. So when he rode into Denver in June to sell his furs, he was listening when a well-dressed man in the saloon mentioned he was hiring. The man's name was Vincent Blackwood. He wore a black suit that had been tailored in St. Louis, or maybe even New York, and his hands were clean in a way that marked him as someone who had never done hard labor. He had a southern accent, cultured and smooth, the kind of voice that could sell ice to Eskimos. "I'm looking for a scout," Blackwood said, buying Silas a whiskey without being asked. "Someone who knows the high country. I'm in the mining business, and I need maps of potential locations." Silas studied him over the rim of his glass. "What kind of mining?" "Silver, maybe copper. The assayers say there are rich deposits up in those peaks. I just need to know how to get to them. The high country is Ute territory, which is why I need someone who can move quietly." Blackwood smiled. "I'm willing to pay $200 in gold for 3 weeks of work. All you have to do is show me the trails and draw me some maps." $200. It was a fortune, more than Silas usually made in a year. "Why so much?" Silas asked. "Because it's dangerous," Blackwood said simply, "and because I pay for quality." Silas should have asked more questions, should have wondered why a mining speculator needed detailed maps of trails rather than surveys of rock formations, should have noticed the hardness in Blackwood's eyes, the way they never quite smiled even when his mouth did. But grief and poverty make a man stupid. They make him see what he wants to see. Silas took the job. For 3 weeks, he guided Blackwood through the mountains, showing him the passes and the creek beds in the hidden valleys. He drew maps with careful precision, marking every landmark and measuring distances by the hour. Blackwood asked questions constantly. How many people could travel this trail at once? Where was the nearest water? Were there places to camp unseen from the ridges? Strange questions for a mining operation, but Silas told himself it was not his business to ask why. On the last day, they were camped on a high ridge overlooking a forested valley. Blackwood stood at the edge, looking down through a brass telescope. "What's that building one?" he asked. Silas came to look. Down in the valley, perhaps 5 miles distant, was a cluster of log buildings surrounding a larger structure with a cross on top. "That's the convent of St. Catherine," Silas said. "Catholic nuns run it. They teach orphan children and tend to travelers." Blackwood wrote something in a leather notebook. His handwriting was elegant, flowing. "How would one approach it by trail, I mean?" "There's a wagon road from the east, but it's rough. Most folks come in from the south following the creek." "And from the north," Silas described the trail. Blackwood wrote it all down with great care. "Do you have business with the nuns?" Silas asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "Just curiosity," Blackwood said. But something in his smile made Silas's skin prickle. They rode back to Denver the next day. Blackwood paid him the $200 in gold coin, each piece heavy and real in Silas's hand. They shook hands outside the assay office. Blackwood's grip was firm and dry. "Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Brennan," Blackwood said. "If I need further assistance, I'll be in touch." Silas watched him walk away down the muddy street, and for just a moment he felt something twist in his gut. A warning, an intuition born of 12 years surviving in country that killed the careless. But he pushed it down. He had money now. He could fix his cabin and buy supplies and make it through another winter. That was all that mattered. He rode back to the mountains and tried to forget Vincent Blackwood's elegant handwriting and smooth southern voice. 2 weeks later, on the night of August 15th, Silas was camped 15 miles from his cabin. He had been checking his trap lines and exhaustion had caught up with him before he could make it home. He built a small fire, ate a supper of jerky and hardtack, and rolled himself in his blanket as the stars came out overhead. He was almost asleep when he heard the bells. Church bells ringing in the distance. Fast and frantic, the pattern that meant alarm. Danger. Help. Silas sat up, his heart suddenly pounding. The sound was coming from the south, from the valley where the convent stood. He could see a glow on the horizon, orange and red and terrible. Fire. He should have saddled his horse and ridden toward it, should have tried to help, but something held him paralyzed. Some animal instinct that recognized the difference between a candle and a wildfire, between an accident and an atrocity. The bells rang for 10 minutes and then stopped abruptly, cut off mid-peal. The glow continued through the night. Silas did not sleep. He sat by his dead fire and watched that distant hell burn until dawn came gray and cold. When the sun was high enough to see by, he saddled his horse with hands that shook. He rode south. He told himself he was being foolish. It had probably been a lightning strike, a cooking fire gone wrong, an accident. But his hands would not stop shaking. The smell hit him 2 miles out. Smoke and something sweeter and more terrible. Burned meat, burned hair, the smell of death rendered by flame. The convent was a ruin. The main building, which had been a sturdy log structure 2 stories high, was now a collapsed skeleton of blackened timbers. The chapel was gone, entirely reduced to a heap of ash and stone. The smaller outbuildings were smoking shells, and there were bodies. Silas dismounted on legs that barely held him. He walked through the destruction with his hand over his nose and mouth, trying not to breathe too deeply. He found Sister Mary first. He recognized her by the silver cross she always wore still hanging around the charred remnant of her neck. She had been shot in the back, then dragged into the burning building. He found old brother Thomas next to the well, his skull caved in by a rifle butt. He found 3 children in what had been the schoolroom, huddled together in the corner where the smoke had taken them. Their faces were soot black, but their features were still recognizable. They looked like they were sleeping. Silas made it to the edge of the compound before he vomited. He fell to his knees and retched until there was nothing left, until he was bringing up bile and spit, until his throat was raw. When he could stand again, he went back. He counted the dead. 11 bodies, 8 nuns, 3 groundskeepers, 6 children, but the convent had housed 30 people. Where were the rest? He searched the ruins more carefully, looking through the ash and rubble. He found the vault in the basement of the main building. It had been blown open with gunpowder. The iron door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, the space was empty except for a pile of scorched ledgers. The gold was gone. $50,000 in donations meant for building a hospital, all stolen. And on the floor of the vault, half burned and trampled into ash, was a piece of paper that made Silas's blood turn to ice water. It was one of his maps, the map he had drawn for Vincent Blackwood, the map showing how to approach the convent from the north without being seen from the road. The paper was stained with blood. Silas picked it up with fingers that had gone numb. He stared at his own handwriting, at the careful notations he had made about water sources and camping spots and the best route for multiple riders. He had drawn the path for murderers. He had taken $200 in gold to lead wolves to sheep. The sound that came out of his throat was not quite human. It was a howl of anguish and self-loathing, so profound it seemed to tear something loose inside his chest. He fell to his knees in the ash and screamed Margaret's name. Screamed at God, screamed at the mountains that had hidden him from the consequences of his choices. No one answered. When he had no voice left, he knelt in the ruins and found Mother Superior's journal half burned, but still readable in places. The last entry was dated the day before the attack. "If evil men come," she had written in her careful script, "we shall flee to the Valley of Saints. Only God knows that place. We shall trust in his mercy." The Valley of Saints. Silas had never heard of it, but somewhere perhaps there were survivors. Women and children who had escaped the slaughter. And the men who had done this, the men who had used Silas's maps to commit murder, were still hunting them. Silas stood in the ashes of the convent and made a choice. He could not undo what he had done, could not bring back the dead, could not wash the blood from his hands, but he could find the survivors, could try to protect them, could do something, anything to balance the weight of his sin. It was not redemption. Redemption was too big a word for too small an action, but it was all he had. He began searching for tracks. For 2 weeks, Silas hunted ghosts through the high country. He found old campsites long abandoned. He found trails that led nowhere. He found false leads and dead ends in a dozen places where desperate people had tried to hide their passage and mostly succeeded. But Silas Brennan was the best tracker in the Rockies. He had spent 12 years reading the language of broken twigs and disturbed stones. He knew how to see what others missed. On the morning of September 1st, he found them. The tracks were faint, nearly washed away by rain, but they were there, small footprints in the mud by a stream. Women's shoes worn thin at the heels, a child's bare foot, the toes spread wide, and the hoof prints of 3 horses unshod traveling at a walk. They were moving west toward the deepest parts of the mountains. Silas followed. The trail led him into country so remote he had only been there once before years ago, chasing a wounded elk. It was a maze of narrow canyons and slot ravines, places where the sun only touched the ground for an hour at noon. The cliffs rose sheer on both sides, 200 feet of smooth stone that no horse could climb. It was perfect country for people who needed to disappear. On the 3rd day of tracking, the canyon walls began to close in. The path became so narrow his horse had to turn sideways to squeeze through gaps in the rock. Silas dismounted and led the animal by the reins, his rifle held ready in his free hand. He was studying the ground, looking for the next footprint, when the rope came out of nowhere. It dropped over his shoulders like a striking snake, cinching tight around his arms before he could react. The force of it jerked him backward. He lost his grip on the rifle. It clattered to the stones as he hit the ground hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. He tried to roll, tried to get his legs under him, but a second rope caught his ankle and yanked. He went down again, face first this time, tasted blood and rock dust. Hands grabbed his arms, pulling them behind his back. More rope wrapped around his wrists, binding them tight enough that his fingers went numb. Silas thrashed, trying to throw off whoever was holding him, but there were too many of them. They swarmed him like wolves on a wounded elk, efficient and merciless. When they finally let him up, he was surrounded. But they were not the men he had expected to find. They were women. 7 of them, ranging in age from perhaps 20 to 60 years old. They wore the black habits and white wimples of Catholic nuns, though the fabric was torn and stained with travel. They held rifles and shotguns with the awkward grip of people who had learned to shoot recently and out of desperate necessity. Their faces were gaunt with hunger and hard with suspicion. And leading them was the youngest. She was perhaps 28 or 30, though it was hard to tell beneath the dirt and exhaustion. Her habit was torn at the shoulder, revealing a bandage wrapped around her upper arm. Her hands gripping an old Springfield rifle were calloused and scarred from labor. But it was her eyes that stopped Silas cold. They were black and deep and absolutely merciless. They looked at him the way a farmer looks at a snake found in the henhouse. "Stand," she commanded. Silas struggled to his feet. The rope around his neck pulled tight, held by an old man with liver-spotted hands and a shotgun that shook but stayed pointed at Silas's chest. The woman stepped closer. She reached into his saddlebag and pulled out his possessions one by one, his spare ammunition, his hunting knife, his canteen, and then she found the map. It was not the same map he had given Blackwood. This was a copy he had made for himself showing the trails in this region. But it was in the same style, the same handwriting. The woman's face went white as chalk. Her hands tightened on the paper until it crumpled. "You're a scout," she said. Her voice was low and controlled, but underneath it Silas could hear fury barely contained. "Just like the ones who led the devils to us." "I'm not here to hurt you," Silas said. "That's what the last man said before he shot Sister Mary." She turned to the other women, raising her voice. "This man has maps. He's been tracking us. He works for them." "No," Silas tried to say, but the old man jerked the rope tight around his throat, cutting off his air. "Silence," the woman snapped. "You don't get to speak. Murderers don't get to speak." She turned to the group. "We bring him to Mother Ruth. She decides." They marched him deeper into the canyon. The rope around his neck was a constant threat, pulled tight enough that he had to concentrate on each breath. His wrists bound behind his back had started to lose feeling. but he barely noticed the discomfort. He was too busy trying to understand what he had walked into. These were the survivors, the women and children who had fled the burning convent. 30 people reduced to this ragged armed band hiding in the wilderness like hunted animals. And they thought he was working for the men who had destroyed their lives. The irony was so bitter it made his teeth ache. After an hour of walking, the narrow canyon opened into a hidden valley, perhaps half a mile across. It was a secret place invisible from above, accessible only through the slot canyon they had just navigated. A thin stream ran down one side, fed by snowmelt from the peaks above. Cottonwood trees clustered near the water, their leaves already turning yellow with the approach of autumn. And scattered throughout the valley were makeshift shelters, canvas tents salvaged from God knew where. Leaned as made from pine branches. A few crude structures of piled stones and logs. Children stared at him from the safety of the shelters. Their eyes were huge in their thin faces. He counted 14 of them, ranging from perhaps 4 years old to mid-teens. They looked like refugees from a war, which Silas realized with a sick feeling in his gut was exactly what they were. The women marched him to the center of the camp, where a larger shelter had been built against the canyon wall. It was the closest thing to a permanent structure in the valley, with walls of stacked stone and a roof of woven branches covered in mud. An old woman emerged from the shelter leaning heavily on a walking stick of polished juniper wood. She was perhaps 60 years old with white hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her habit was as worn and patched as the others, but she wore it with a dignity that made it look like ceremonial robes. She moved slowly, arthritis visible in every careful step, but her eyes were sharp and clear as she studied the bound man before her. "What is this, Sister Abigail?" the old woman asked. The young woman with the black eyes stepped forward. "We found him tracking us, Mother Ruth. He has maps. He's a scout." Mother Ruth looked at Silas for a long moment. Her gaze was not cruel, but it was absolutely penetrating. It felt like she could see straight through to the guilty heart of him. "Your name?" she asked. "Silas Brennan." "Why were you following us, Silas Brennan?" He met her eyes directly. "I wanted to help." Sister Abigail made a sound of disgust. "He lies, Mother Ruth. Look at his maps. Look at his weapons. He's here to finish what the others started." "I'm not," Silas said. His voice came out rougher than he intended. "I swear to God, I'm not here to hurt you." "Don't you dare speak of God," Sister Abigail hissed. She stepped close to him, her face inches from his. "Don't you dare speak his name with the blood of children on your hands. I didn't kill anyone. You led them to us." The control finally broke. Sister Abigail's voice rose to a shout that echoed off the canyon walls. "You drew the maps. You showed them the way, my sister. She was 16 years old. She died screaming in that fire because of men like you." The raw anguish in her voice hit Silas like a physical blow. He could see it now in her face, the grief so profound it had transmuted into rage. She was not just angry, she was shattered. "I didn't know," Silas said. The words felt pathetically inadequate. "I didn't know what they were going to do to him." "Liar!" Sister Abigail drew back her hand and struck him across the face. The blow snapped his head to the side. He tasted blood from a split lip. He did not try to dodge, did not try to defend himself. Just stood there and took it because, what could he say? That he had been paid, that he had needed the money, that he had not asked questions because he had not wanted to know the answers. All of it was true. None of it mattered. "Sister Abigail," Mother Ruth said quietly, "that is enough." "It's not enough." Sister Abigail turned to the old woman, her eyes wild. "Nothing will ever be enough. We should kill him now. Put a bullet in his head and leave him for the vultures." "Perhaps," Mother Ruth said. She looked at Silas again. "Perhaps that is what justice demands." Silas said nothing. What defense did he have? He had drawn the map. He had taken the money. He had enabled murder. If they wanted to execute him, he had earned it. But Mother Ruth did not reach for a weapon. Instead, she turned to the other women who had gathered in a loose circle around them. "We will hold council," she announced. "All adult women of the community will have a voice. The children will be sent to the shelters." One of the older nuns began herding the children away. They went reluctantly, casting frightened glances back at the bound stranger in their midst. When the children were gone, Mother Ruth gestured for the women to sit. There were 12 of them in total, not counting the 4 old men who served as groundskeepers and guards. They arranged themselves in a rough semicircle on the hard-packed earth. Silas was left standing, the rope around his neck, held by one of the old men. A warning, a reminder that his life hung by a thread. Mother Ruth stood before the council, both hands resting on her walking stick. She looked old and tired, but her voice when she spoke carried authority. "This man came to our valley carrying maps and weapons," she began. "Sister Abigail believes he works for the men who destroyed our home. He claims he came to help. We must decide what to do with him." "Kill him," Sister Abigail said immediately, "before he can lead them here." A murmur of agreement from several of the younger nuns, but an older woman in her 40s spoke up. Her name was Sister Martha, and her hands were rough with calluses from years of farm work before she had taken vows. "If we kill him, we become murderers ourselves," Sister Martha said. "Is that what we want, to become like them?" "He is like them," Sister Abigail countered. "He works for them." "He says he doesn't. And we should believe him, a man who tracks us through the wilderness carrying guns and maps." Mother Ruth raised a hand for silence. "Sister Martha makes a valid point, but so does Sister Abigail. Let us examine the facts." She turned to Silas. "You say you came to help. How did you find us?" "I tracked you," Silas admitted. "I found footprints by a stream 3 days ago. I followed them here." "So you are a skilled tracker?" "Yes. Skilled enough to find us when we have been careful to hide our trail." Silas said nothing. The implication was clear. "And if you can find us," Mother Ruth continued, "then the men hunting us can find us as well, especially if they have someone of your skill guiding them." "I'm not guiding them," Silas said. "I came alone." Sister Abigail stepped forward again. "Then explain the maps. Explain why you have detailed charts of these mountains." "I'm a trapper. I've lived here 12 years. I know every canyon and ridge." "Convenient," Sister Abigail said coldly. "A man who knows the land. A man who can track like a wolf. A man who carries weapons and shows up precisely where desperate people are hiding. If that's not a scout for hire, what is it?" Silas met her furious gaze and saw no mercy there. Saw only the reflection of his own guilt. "I made a mistake," he said quietly. 3 months ago, a man hired me to make maps. He said he was looking for mining sites. I didn't ask questions. I took his money and I drew him maps showing trails through these mountains." The women went very still. 2 weeks ago, I rode past the convent. I saw what they did. I saw the bodies. I found one of my maps in the vault covered in blood. I realized I had led them there." Sister Abigail's face had gone white. "You admit it. You admit you helped them." "I didn't know what they were planning." "You didn't ask," her voice cracked. "You took blood money and you didn't ask what it was for." "You're right," Silas said. "I should have asked. I should have seen. I was—" He stopped. What was the word? Greedy, desperate, blind. "All of it, none of it enough. I can't change what I did," he said finally. "But when I saw what happened, I went looking for survivors. I thought if I could find you, I could help, could protect you." "Protect us," Sister Abigail repeated. "The wolf offers to protect the sheep." "I know how that sounds. Do you know what it's like to wake up to screaming, to smell smoke and gunpowder, to watch children burn alive?" Her voice broke. "My sister, Hannah, she was 16. She wanted to be a teacher. She used to laugh at everything. She died in that fire, and you took money to make it happen." Tears were streaming down Sister Abigail's face now, but her eyes were still hard as flint. "So forgive me if I don't believe you want to help. Forgive me if I think the kindest thing we can do is put a bullet in your skull right now." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Mother Ruth stood very still, watching Silas with those penetrating eyes. "Sister Abigail speaks from grief," the old woman said finally. "But her grief does not make her wrong." She turned to the other women. "We have 3 choices. Execute this man for his part in the destruction of our home. Exile him knowing he might lead our enemies to us. Or keep him bound and watched and make use of his strength." "Make use of him?" Sister Abigail looked shocked. "Mother Ruth, surely you're not suggesting—" "Winter is coming," Mother Ruth said. Her voice was calm but implacable. "We have 14 children to feed. We have no men strong enough to do heavy labor. We need firewood and meat and shelter built before the snow comes. This man is strong. This man knows how to survive in these mountains. This man is a murderer, Sister Abigail said. This man is a resource, Mother Ruth corrected, and resources in our current situation are precious. She looked at Silas. If we let you live, you will work. You will carry water and chop wood and hunt game. You will do whatever the women of this community command. You will be a beast of burden, nothing more. If you refuse, if you try to escape, if you harm anyone here, you will be killed immediately. Do you understand? Silas understood completely. They were offering him slavery. Hard labor under constant guard with death as the penalty for any transgression. It was more mercy than he deserved. I understand, he said. Do you accept these terms? He thought of Margaret's grave on the hill behind his cabin, thought of the burned bodies of children in the ruins of the convent, thought of the map with his handwriting stained with blood. I accept. Mother Ruth nodded slowly. She turned to Sister Abigail. You will be his overseer. You will assign his work and ensure he completes it. If he fails or disobeys, you have my permission to use whatever force is necessary. Sister Abigail's jaw tightened. Mother Ruth, I don't want. I know what you want, child, but wanting is a luxury we cannot afford. This man will work. You will make certain of it. That is my decision. The old woman raised her walking stick and brought it down firmly on the ground. The sharp crack echoed through the valley like a judge's gavel. Take him to the horse pen, Mother Ruth commanded. Tie him there. Tomorrow his service begins. As the old men dragged him away, Silas looked back at Sister Abigail. She stood rigid, her fists clenched at her sides, watching him with those merciless black eyes. He had thought the hardest thing in the world was living with the guilt of what he had done. He was about to learn he was wrong. The first week stripped Silas Brennan down to nothing. They woke him before dawn each morning by throwing a bucket of creek water over his head. The shock of it left him gasping, his clothes soaked and clinging to skin that was already raw from sleeping on bare ground. There was no fire to warm himself by, no hot coffee to chase away the mountain cold. Just the rope around his neck, and Sister Abigail's voice sharp as a blade. Vince, get up, the water won't haul itself. On the spring that fed the camp was a mile uphill, following a goat trail so steep that loose shale slid away beneath his boots with every step. They gave him a wooden yoke to carry the kind oxen wore with 2 buckets, suspended from chains on either side. Each bucket held 8 gallons when full, 16 gallons total. 130 pounds of water on shoulders that were strong from 12 years of mountain living, but had never borne this particular kind of burden. Sister Abigail sat on a boulder 50 feet above the trail, her rifle across her knees, and watched him climb. She did not offer encouragement, did not speak except to give commands, just watched with those black eyes that held no warmth, no mercy, no hope of forgiveness. The first trip took him an hour. His shoulders were screaming by the time he reached the camp. The second trip took longer because his legs were shaking. By the third trip, the wooden yoke had rubbed the skin on his shoulders raw and bleeding. On the fourth trip, he slipped. His boot caught on a patch of wet moss. His ankle turned. The weight of the water carried him sideways and down, and he hit the trail hard, both buckets flying wide and shattering against the rocks. 130 pounds of water, gone in an instant, soaking into the thirsty ground. Silas lay there for a moment, tasting blood where he had bitten his tongue. His shoulder felt like someone had driven a spike through it. Sister Abigail appeared above him, silhouetted against the morning sky. Get up, she said. I slipped. The water doesn't care why you spilled it. It's gone. Go back and fill them again. Silas pushed himself to his knees. I need a minute. You need to obey. Now. He looked up at her, this woman who was maybe 5.5 feet tall, who probably weighed 120 pounds soaking wet, who stood over him like a conquering general. I'm doing my best, he said. Your best is weak, Sister Abigail replied. Her voice was cold enough to freeze whiskey. You're used to sitting on a horse while the animal does the work. Here you are the animal. So stop whining and haul the water. He made 8 trips that first day. By the time the sun set, his shoulders were hamburger meat beneath his shirt and his hands were blistered from gripping the yoke. They gave him a bowl of thin soup and a piece of bread so hard he had to soak it in the soup to chew it. He ate sitting on the ground at the edge of the camp, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the spoon. The children watched him from the safety of their shelters, wide-eyed and silent. When he finished eating, they tied him to a pine tree near the horse corral. No blanket, no shelter. Just the rope and the hard ground and the cold mountain night pressing down. He lay there staring up at the stars and listened to the nuns singing "Compline the Night Prayers." Their voices rose thin and pure in the darkness. Latin words he did not understand, set to melodies that made something in his chest ache. "Keep me as the apple of your eye," they sang. "Hide me in the shadow of your wings." Silas closed his eyes and thought of Margaret, thought of the children who had burned, thought of Sister Abigail's sister Hannah, who had been 16 and wanted to teach and had died screaming. He had earned this suffering, every bit of it, but that knowledge did not make the ground any softer or the cold any less bitter. The second day they set him to chopping wood. The axe they gave him was old and dull, the kind of tool that made hard work harder. The wood was standing deadfall ironwood and oak that had been seasoning for years and was now hard as stone. Sister Abigail pointed to a stack of logs that looked like it would take a week to split. "By sunset," she said, "that's not possible. Then you'll work into the night." She sat 20 feet away, her rifle within easy reach, and watched him swing the axe. Each impact sent shockwaves up his arms and into his already brutalized shoulders. The blisters from yesterday's water hauling broke open and bled. New blisters formed on top of the old ones. He worked through the pain because there was no alternative. Worked until his vision blurred and the muscles in his back felt like they were tearing loose from his spine. Worked until sunset came and went and he was splitting logs by the light of the rising moon. Sister Abigail finally called a halt at midnight. "Enough," she said. "You're useless now anyway." She gave him the same thin soup and hard bread. He was too tired to care about the taste, too tired to do anything but shovel food into his mouth and collapse where they tied him. That night he dreamed of fire. The third day broke him. They set him to digging a new latrine pit at the far edge of the camp. The ground was not soil, but clay mixed with rocks, hard as concrete and twice as stubborn. They gave him a pickaxe and a shovel, and Sister Abigail's cold instruction: 6 feet deep, 4 feet square. Don't stop until it's done. The sun climbed high and merciless. The thin mountain air offered no relief from its heat. Silas swung the pickaxe until his hands bled, then shoveled out the broken clay until the hole was knee-deep, then waist-deep, then deep enough that he had to stand in the pit to keep digging. At midday, Sister Abigail appeared at the edge of the pit. She held a water skin in one hand. She took a long, deliberate drink, letting a few drops run down her chin while Silas watched from below. "Thirsty?" she asked. "Yes," she corked the water skin. "Thirst is a good teacher. It teaches you to be grateful for what you have." Silas leaned on the shovel, his chest heaving. "I'm grateful I'm not you." Sister Abigail's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I said I'm grateful I don't have a stone where my heart should be." The words were out before he could stop them. Exhaustion and pain had worn away his self-control. Sister Abigail dropped into the pit in one fluid motion. She was suddenly right in front of him, close enough that he could see gold flecks in those black eyes. "You think this is about skin," she hissed. "You think this is about you being white and me being cruel. Look around you, Carver." She gestured to the camp beyond the pit, to the ragged shelters and the thin children and the women whose faces had been carved by suffering. "Look at Sister Martha. Her husband was shot in the back while planting corn. Look at Mother Ruth. She walks with a cane because a drunken prospector broke her leg for sport when she refused to give him whiskey. You think I hate you because you're white? I hate you because you represent the end of my world." She jabbed a finger into his chest hard enough to leave a bruise. "You represent the disease. You represent the laws written on paper and broken the next day. You stand there and ask me about my heart. You who help soldiers find innocent people." Silas had gone very still. "I was a scout," he said quietly. "I did a job." "You hunted people," Sister Abigail said. "And now you dig holes in the dirt. It fits you better." She climbed out of the pit and walked away, leaving him standing in the half-dug grave of his own making. But as he watched her go, Silas felt something strange stir in his chest. Not anger, something else. Something that recognized the fire burning in this woman, the sheer force of guilt that kept her standing when everything she loved had been taken. She was cruel, yes, but she was also more alive than anyone he had known since Margaret died. The realization disturbed him more than her hatred did. By the end of the first week, Silas had lost 15 pounds he could not afford to lose. His hands were a landscape of broken blisters and calluses forming on top of calluses. His shoulders were purple with bruises from the water yoke. His back was a constant scream of pain that never quite stopped. But something else was happening too. The children had stopped being afraid of him. It started with little Mary, a girl of 6 or 7, who had not spoken a word since the attack on the convent. She would sit at the edge of the camp and watch him work, her dark eyes tracking his every movement. On the 8th day, Silas was repairing a broken bucket, carving a new handle from a piece of pine. Mary approached slowly like a deer testing the wind. She stood just out of reach and watched him whittle. Silas pretended not to notice her, just kept working the knife, moving in smooth strokes that peeled away curls of wood. After a while, he carved a small bird from a scrap piece. Nothing fancy, just a simple shape with a beak and tail feathers. He set it on the ground between them. Mary looked at the bird, looked at Silas. Her small hand darted out, snatched the bird, and she ran away, clutching it to her chest. Sister Abigail, watching from across the camp, called out sharply, "Don't use the children to manipulate us." "I'm not manipulating anyone," Silas said with looking up. "I just wanted her to smile. You don't get to want anything. You just do what you're told." But the next day, Mary brought him a handful of wildflowers. She set them carefully next to where he was working and ran away before he could say thank you. Sister Abigail saw it happen. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. When she turned away, Silas could have sworn her shoulders were trembling. The incident with the horse came on day 10. The camp had 3 horses, animals that had escaped the burning of the convent and been recaptured in the wild. One was a gelding, half broken and dangerous, that no one could handle without risk. Thomas, the oldest of the orphan boys at 14, decided to prove his courage by entering the corral to feed the gelding. He carried a bucket of grain, walking slow and steady like he had seen the groundskeepers do. But the gelding was in a mood. It tossed its head and stamped ears pinned back flat against its skull. Silas was working 50 feet away, building a small shed for firewood storage. He saw the horse's body language shift, saw the moment it decided to charge. He did not think, just dropped his hammer and vaulted the corral fence in one motion. The gelding reared front hooves, slashing the air above Thomas's head. The boy froze, too terrified to run. Silas hit the space between them at a dead sprint. He threw his arms up, making himself big, and roared at the horse with everything he had. "Ha, back, get back!" The gelding's hoof caught him on the shoulder, a glancing blow that felt like being hit with a hammer. Silas spun, but did not go down. He lunged forward and grabbed the horse's halter, using his weight to yank the animal's head down and to the side. "Easy," he growled, hanging on as the horse thrashed. "Easy, you devil, that's enough." He drove his shoulder into the horse's neck, murmuring low and steady, the way he talked to spooked animals in the wild. The gelding shuddered and snorted, but stopped trying to rear. Silas held it for another few heartbeats, then slowly released the halter and backed away with his hands raised. The horse watched him with rolling eyes but stayed put. Silas turned. Thomas was still standing there, white as a sheet. Sister Martha had the boy's arm, now pulling him out of the corral to safety. The entire camp had frozen. Every eye was on Silas. He stood there breathing hard, his shoulder throbbing where the hoof had connected. Looked down and saw blood seeping through his shirt. Sister Abigail walked up to the fence. She stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You could have let the horse kill him," she said quietly. "It would have been one less mouth to feed, one less witness if you ever tried to escape." Silas met her eyes. "He's a child. That's reason enough." Something shifted in Sister Abigail's face. Not forgiveness, not trust, but a crack in the wall of her hatred, small as a hairline fracture, but there nonetheless. "Thank you," she said. 2 words. The first kindness she had shown him. That evening, she brought him a second portion of soup. Did not say anything, just set the bowl down next to him and walked away. But when she thought he was not looking, Silas saw her shoulders shake like she was crying. By the 3rd week, the relationship between captor and captive had begun to shift in ways neither of them acknowledged aloud. Silas was no longer just a beast of burden. He was becoming necessary. not just for his strength, but for his knowledge. Winter was coming to the high country. The aspen leaves had turned gold and begun to fall. The nights were dropping into the 30s. Soon there would be snow, and snow at this altitude could be 6 feet deep and last until April. The camp was not prepared. Mother Ruth called a council on a cold morning when their breath came out in clouds. She stood before the gathered women, leaning heavily on her walking stick. "We have food for perhaps 6 more weeks," she said. "After that, we starve. We have shelter that will not survive the first heavy snow. We have no man strong enough or skilled enough to do the work that needs doing before winter closes us in." Sister Martha spoke up. "We have Brennan." "Brennan is a prisoner," Sister Judah said. She was young and frightened of everything, and the presence of a man in camp terrified her more than hunger did. "We can't trust him." "We don't have to trust him," Sister Martha said. "We just have to use him. He's lived in these mountains for 12 years. He knows how to survive." Mother Ruth turned to Silas, who sat at the edge of the circle, his hands still bound. "Is this true?" she asked. "Do you know how to survive a mountain winter?" "Yes." "Will you teach us?" Silas looked around the circle, at the thin face and the desperate eyes, at Sister Abigail, who watched him with that same unreadable expression. "I'll teach you," he said, "but you'll have to untie my hands. Can't build a smokehouse or set traps with rope around my wrists." The women looked at each other. The risk was obvious. Untied, he could run, could overpower one of the guards and take a weapon, could escape into the mountains and lead their enemies back. But the alternative was death by starvation or exposure. Mother Ruth made the decision. Untie him, but Sister Abigail and Sister Martha will watch him at all times. If he tries anything, shoot him in the legs first. We can use a cripple. We can't use a corpse. They cut the ropes. Silas rubbed his wrists, feeling blood flow back into his hands for the first time in days. "All right," he said. "First thing we need is a smokehouse." He taught them to build it using flat stones stacked like shingles, creating a chamber where they could hang meat over smoldering hickory. Showed them how to keep the smoke thick and cool, preserving venison and elk for months instead of days. He taught them to tan hides using the brains of the animals they hunted, working the skins until they were soft as cloth. Sister Martha proved surprisingly good at it, her farmer's hands remembering the work from childhood. He taught them to read the weather, how clouds with a halo around the moon meant snow within a day, how squirrels hoarding more food than usual meant a harsh winter coming, how birds migrating early meant hard storms ahead. He set trap lines for rabbits and grouse, showing the older boys like Thomas how to check them without disturbing the surrounding brush. And in return, the nuns taught him. Sister Martha showed him which plants were medicine and which were poison. Willow bark for pain, sage for infection, yarrow to stop bleeding. She made him memorize them all, testing him until he could identify them by touch alone. Sister Abigail taught him discipline, not the discipline of hard labor, though there was still plenty of that, but the discipline of prayer and meditation. She would sit with him in the evenings after the work was done, when he was too tired to do anything but listen. "You work with your body," she said one night, "but what about your soul?" "My soul is my business." "Your soul is broken. I can see it. You carry guilt like other men carry tools." Silas said nothing. What was there to say? She was right. "Do you know the Hail Mary?" she asked. "I'm not Catholic." "I didn't ask if you were Catholic. I asked if you knew the prayer." "No." She taught it to him, made him repeat it until he had it memorized. He did not believe the words, did not think any amount of praying would wash away what he had done. But the rhythm of them was soothing, a pattern his tired mind could follow. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus." On the 23rd night, Sister Abigail sat with him after the others had gone to sleep. The fire had burned down to coals that glowed like dragon eyes in the darkness. "Why did you really come here?" she asked. The question surprised him. She had not asked anything personal before, had not shown any interest in his motivations beyond simple condemnation. "I told you. I wanted to help." "That's what you said. But people don't track women and children through hostile territory just to help. There has to be more." Silas poked at the coals with a stick, watching sparks spiral up into the night. "I was married once," he said. "Her name was Margaret. She died giving birth 8 months before I met Vincent Blackwood. The baby died too. A son. Sister Abigail said nothing, just listened. I buried them on a hill overlooking our cabin. I used to go up there every night and talk to her grave, tell her about my day, ask her what I should do, but she never answered. He smiled, but it was a bitter thing. After a while, the silence made me crazy, made me stop caring about right and wrong, made me take money from a man whose eyes were dead because I needed that money more than I needed questions answered. So you chose gold over conscience. I chose survival, or thought I did. Turns out I chose murder. His sister Abigail was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I had someone I loved too, my sister Hannah. She was 16, full of light. She wanted to teach children to read because she believed education could save the world. Her voice broke slightly. She believed in goodness, in people, right up until the moment they killed her. Silas turned to look at her. In the firelight, he could see tears on her face, though her expression had not changed. I'm sorry, he said. The words felt pathetically small. Are you just sorry you got caught? Both, but mostly I'm sorry she died. Sorry any of them died. Sorry I was stupid and greedy and blind. Sister Abigail wiped her face with the back of her hand. Do you know what the worst part is? I believe you. I believe you're genuinely sorry, and that makes it so much harder to hate you. She stood abruptly. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you're building a shelter for the horses. Winter's coming fast. Wait. She walked away before he could respond, disappearing into the darkness beyond the firelight. Silas lay down on his blanket and stared up at the stars. Something had changed tonight. Some small shift in the terrible weight between them. It was not forgiveness, not even close, but it was a beginning. The stranger stumbled into camp on the 39th day, and with him came the truth that Silas had been dreading. It was Thomas who found him, the 14-year-old, out checking trap lines in the early morning. The boy came running back to camp, his face flushed with exertion and fear. Someone's coming. A man, he's hurt. The nuns grabbed their weapons and formed a defensive line at the canyon entrance. Silas, working on the horse shelter 100 yards away, dropped his hammer and ran. He reached the entrance just as the stranger emerged from the slot canyon. The man was maybe 50 years old, with the gray shot through his beard and blood soaking through the buckskin shirt on his left side. An arrow shaft protruded from his shoulder, broken off about 6 inches from where it had entered. His face was gray with blood loss and pain. He took 3 steps into the valley and collapsed. Mother Ruth made the decision instantly. Bring him in. We are people of Bum. We help those in need. They carried him to the medical shelter, such as it was. Sister Martha, who had the most experience with wounds, set to work immediately. The arrow had to come out. Silas held the man's arms down while Sister Martha cut deeper into the shoulder to expose the arrowhead. The stranger screamed a sound that sent birds bursting from the cottonwoods in panicked flight. But Sister Martha was good. She extracted the arrow with minimal tearing, packed the wound with herbs, and bandaged it tight. The man drifted in and out of consciousness for hours. They gave him water and broth, trying to replace what he had lost. It was evening when he finally opened his eyes fully and looked around at the circle of faces watching him. Where am I? He rasped. You're safe, Mother Ruth said. You're with the Sisters of St. Catherine, or what remains of us. The man blinked, trying to focus. His gaze swept across the nuns, the children, the rough shelters. Then his eyes landed on Silas, standing at the back of the group. The stranger's eyes went wide. Brennan, Silas Brennan. Every head in the camp turned to stare at Silas. You know this man? Sister Abigail asked, her voice deadly quiet. The stranger started to laugh. It was a painful sound, more cough than mirth. Know him. I worked with him, Cole Jennings, at your service. Former Army scout, same as Brennan here. Silas felt his stomach drop into his boots. You worked with him. Sister Abigail's hand went to the knife at her belt. 3 years we rode together. Brennan was the best tracker in Colorado. Could find water in a desert and trail a ghost through a blizzard. Jennings coughed, red flecking his lips. Last I heard, Blackwood had hired him for mapping work. Good money for easy labor, from what Brennan told me in a Denver saloon. The silence that followed was absolute. Sister Abigail turned slowly to face Silas. Her face had gone white, then red, then white again. Is this true? Mother Ruth asked. Her voice was steady but cold as mountain ice. I told you I made maps for Blackwood, Silas said. His mouth had gone dry. But you said you didn't know what he was planning, Sister Abigail said. You said you were innocent. Jennings laughed again, not understanding the danger he was in. Innocent Brennan drew the maps that got us right to the convent's back door. Perfect detail. Water sources, camping spots, the best approach to avoid being seen from the road. He looked at Silas with something like admiration. That raid was clean because of you, friend. In and out before anyone knew we were there. Sister Abigail moved faster than Silas thought possible. She was on him in an instant, her knife pressed against his throat hard enough to draw blood. You knew, she hissed. You knew, and you did it anyway. No, Silas said. Cole, shut your mouth. But Jennings, feverish and confused, kept talking. Course he knew. Blackwood told all of us the plan. Hit the convent, take the gold, burn it down so there'd be no witnesses. Easy work for $200 a man. Sister Abigail's knife hand was shaking. My sister, Hannah. She was 16 years old and she died screaming, and you knew you were leading them there. I didn't know it was a convent, Silas tried to say, but the words were ashes in his mouth. Liar! Sister Abigail's scream was raw and animal. She pulled the knife back like she was going to drive it through his eye. Mother Ruth's voice cracked like a whip. Stop! Sister Abigail froze the knife, trembling an inch from Silas's face. Step back, Mother Ruth commanded. Now! Sister Abigail lowered the knife but did not step back. She was crying now, great heaving sobs that shook her whole body. He killed her, she wept. He killed them all. He knew, and he did it anyway, and we let him live. We let him work beside us and eat with us, and we let him live. Sister Martha and Sister Judith pulled Sister Abigail away. She fought them, screaming obscenities that no nun should know, but they were stronger together than she was alone. Mother Ruth turned to Silas. Her eyes were infinitely sad. Is what this man says true? Did you know Blackwood planned to attack the convent? Silas wanted to lie, wanted to say Jennings was confused by fever, but he was so tired of lying. I knew he was planning something, Silas said quietly. I knew the job paid too well for simple surveying. I knew he asked too many questions about guard posts and escape routes. I knew, and I took the money anyway because I told myself it wasn't my business to ask. So you chose willful blindness. Yes. Mother Ruth closed her eyes. For the first time since Silas had known her, she looked old, looked beaten. Bind him, she said. Take him to the center of camp. We will hold tribunal. And they tied his hands behind his back and threw him against the same pine tree where they had first bound him 5 weeks ago. The circle of women formed around him, and in their faces Silas saw no mercy, saw only rage and grief and the terrible desire for justice. Sister Abigail stood at the front, her face streaked with tears and dirt. We vote, she said. Her voice was hoarse from screaming but steady. Black stone for death, white stone for exile, red stone for continued service. They passed around a bag of colored pebbles. Each woman took one and held it hidden in her fist. The first stone dropped into the wooden bowl with a hollow click. Black, then another. Black, and another, black. 7 black stones, 3 white, 2 red. No clear majority. Mother Ruth stepped forward. As Mother Superior, the final decision was hers. She held a stone in her weathered hand, looked at Silas with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through to his rotten core. Silas Brennan has sinned grievously, she said. He enabled murder through willful ignorance and greed. By all rights, justice demands his death. She paused. The stone in her hand caught the firelight. But our God is a God of redemption. No man is beyond his reach. No sin too great for his mercy. She dropped a red stone into the bowl. He lives, but not as a free man, as a penitent. Sister Abigail made a sound like she had been stabbed. Mother Ruth, I can't. I won't. You will, Mother Ruth said firmly, and you will continue to oversee him, because the hardest part of faith is extending mercy to those who deserve it least. She turned to Silas. You will work twice as hard, sleep outside in all weather, eat last after even the dogs. And every evening you will kneel before Sister Abigail and confess your sins. You will do this until I say otherwise or until you die, whichever comes first. Silas bowed his head. I accept. See that you do. Because if you fail, if you run, if you give me any reason to regret this mercy, Sister Abigail will have her way, and I will hand her the knife myself. They left him tied to the tree through the night. No blanket, no food, just the cold and the darkness and the knowledge that he had been found out at last. In the morning they would begin again. But now there would be no pretense, no hiding behind ignorance, just the raw truth of what he had done and the impossible task of trying to balance it with what he might yet do. Sister Abigail did not speak to him for 3 days. She gave him his assignments in gestures and pointed fingers. Pointed at the woodpile, pointed at the water buckets, pointed at the latrine pit that needed digging deeper. He worked in silence, the weight of her hatred pressing down harder than any physical burden. On the 4th evening, she finally broke the silence. "Kneel," she commanded. Silas knelt in the dirt before her. The entire camp watched. This was his penance, his public confession. "What have you done today to atone?" Sister Abigail asked. "I chopped 3 cords of wood, hunted and brought back 2 rabbits, repaired the roof on Sister Martha's shelter." "Not enough. Tomorrow more." It became a ritual. Every evening at sunset he would kneel and she would ask. He would list his labors and she would declare them insufficient. But on the 7th evening, something changed. When he listed his work, she said, "And what of your soul? What have you done to repair that?" "I prayed," Silas said, "the prayer you taught me." "Did you mean it?" "I don't know. I said the words. I thought about what they meant. I don't know if that's the same as meaning them." Sister Abigail was quiet for a long moment. "At least you're honest about that," she said. "Lying would be worse." She turned to walk away, then stopped. Without looking back, she said, "My sister's name was Hannah. She liked to pick wildflowers. She would bring them to me every morning and tell me what each one meant. Forget-me-nots for remembrance, columbine for courage. She believed flowers were God's way of making the world beautiful." Silas could hear the tears in her voice, even if he could not see them. "I need you to know what you took from the world when you drew those maps," Sister Abigail continued. "I need you to see her face, remember her name. Know that she was real." "I will," Silas promised. "Hannah, 16 years old, who loved flowers and wanted to teach children." Sister Abigail finally looked back at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed but dry. "Good," she said softly. "Remember her when you work. Let her be the reason you don't give up." 2 days later, everything changed again. Cole Jennings had recovered enough to sit up and eat solid food. Mother Ruth prepared to send him on his way with supplies and a blessing. But before he left, Jennings asked to speak with the Mother Superior in private. What he told her sent shockwaves through the camp. Mother Ruth called an emergency council just before sunset. Her face was grave. "Jennings has brought news," she said. "Blackwood is still hunting us. The outlaw believes we have the convent's gold." "We don't have any gold," Sister Martha protested. "The gold was sent to Denver a month before the attack." "Blackwood doesn't know that. Jennings says the outlaw has been tracking us for weeks. He has 15 men with him. They're perhaps 5 days behind, maybe less." The women looked at each other in rising panic. "What do we do?" Sister Judith asked, her voice shaking. "We can't outrun them," Sister Martha said. "Not with children and elderly." "And we can't hide," another nun added. "Not if they're close." Into the terrified silence, Silas spoke. "We fight." Every head turned to stare at him. "You can't fight," Sister Judith said. "You're a prisoner." "I'm a man who fought in the Mexican War," Silas replied. "I know tactics. I know how to turn terrain into an advantage. This valley could be a fortress if we prepare it right." "You want to help us?" Sister Abigail's voice was thick with suspicion. "After everything, I want to stop Blackwood from finishing what I helped him start. If that means helping you, so be it." Mother Ruth studied him for a long moment. Then she made a decision that would change everything. "Teach us," she said. "Teach us to fight." Over the next 2 days, Silas transformed the hidden valley into a killing ground. He mapped out firing positions on the high ground overlooking the Slot Canyon entrance, showed the nuns how to pile loose rocks at the cliff edge, ready to be pushed down on anyone trying to force their way through. He identified the natural choke point, where the canyon walls narrowed to barely 15 feet across. "This is where we stop them," he said. "Stack fallen trees here. Create a barrier. Make them bunch up so their numbers work against them." He taught 5 nuns to shoot properly. Sister Martha proved to be a natural her farm girl background, giving her steady hands and good eyes. Sister Abigail refused at first, citing her vows against taking life. "Your vows won't stop a bullet," Silas said bluntly. "You can pray while you aim, or you can pray at funeral. Your choice." Sister Abigail picked up the rifle. Her first shot hit the target dead center. Silas nodded. "You're a warrior who chose to be a nun. Now you get to be both." On the afternoon of the second day, Thomas came running from his lookout post on the high ridge. "Dust," he shouted. "Coming from the east, a lot of riders." Mother Ruth rang the camp bell. "Everyone to positions, children to the cave now." The valley erupted into controlled chaos. The children were herded to a deep cave at the far end of the valley, hidden behind a screen of brush. Sister Constance, too old to fight, went with them to keep them quiet and calm. The 5 nuns who could shoot took their positions on the cliffs. The old groundskeepers manned the barrier at the choke point, their rifles loaded and ready despite their shaking hands. And Silas climbed to the highest point on the southern ridge, where he could see the entire valley and the approach to it. They had given him back his rifle for this. Trusted him, or at least trusted that he wanted Blackwood dead as much as they did. From his perch, he could see them coming. 15 riders, just as Jennings had said, led by a man in a black suit on a gray horse. Vincent Blackwood. Silas felt something cold and hard settle into his chest. This was the man who had hired him, who had used his maps to commit murder, who was hunting these women and children for gold that did not exist. This was the man whose death would balance some small fraction of the ledger. Silas checked his rifle. 43 rounds. He would make every one count. The riders entered the slot canyon at a walk, their horses' hooves echoing off the stone walls. They were confident, arrogant, expecting to find desperate refugees, not a prepared defense. Blackwood's voice rang out when they were halfway through the canyon. "Sisters, I know you're here. Come out, and we can discuss this like civilized people." No one answered. "I'm a reasonable man," Blackwood continued. "Give me the gold and I'll leave you alone. Keep it and, well, things will get unpleasant." Still silence. Blackwood's genial tone hardened. "Fine. Boys, search every inch of this valley. Tear apart every shelter. Find those nuns and make them talk." The riders spurred their horses forward, eager for violence. They never reached the valley floor. Mother Ruth raised her hand from her position on the north cliff, then brought it down sharply. 200 pounds of granite rolled over the edge and plummeted into the canyon. It struck the lead rider's horse square in the head. The animal went down in a screaming heap, crushing its rider beneath it. More rocks followed. The nuns and groundskeepers pushed boulder after boulder over the edge, creating a deadly rain of stone that filled the narrow canyon with dust and chaos and death. 3 men died in the first 10 seconds. 2 more went down with shattered legs as their horses panicked and threw them. The remaining riders tried to retreat but found their path blocked by fallen rock and thrashing horses. That was when the shooting started. Sister Martha's first shot took a rider clean out of his saddle. Sister Abigail's second shot shattered another man's shoulder, spinning him around before he fell. The outlaws returned fire, wildly shooting at shadows and dust. Their bullets chipped stone but found no flesh. Silas, from his high perch, picked his targets with care. The man trying to rally the others, the one attempting to climb the cliff face, the rider who had drawn a bead on Sister Martha's position. 1 shot, 1 kill, moved to the next. 4 men broke from the main group and began scrambling up the southern ridge, the same ridge where Silas was positioned, the same ridge above the cave where the children hid. Silas abandoned his sniper position and ran. He reached the goat trail just as the first outlaw pulled himself onto the ledge. The man looked up, shocked to see not a nun, but another man, and his moment of hesitation cost him his life. Silas shot him point blank in the chest. The body tumbled backward, knocking the second man off the trail. Both fell 60 feet to the rocks below. The third and fourth men reached the ledge together, pistols drawn. Silas's rifle was empty. He grabbed the nearest rock, hurled it at the third man's face. The impact broke the outlaw's nose in a spray of blood and sent him reeling. The fourth man fired. The bullet caught Silas in the ribs, a white-hot lance of pain that stole his breath. But Silas was already moving. He closed the distance, grabbed the man's gun hand, and twisted. Bones cracked. The pistol fell. Silas drove his elbow into the man's temple and felt something give. The third man's nose broken and bloody, charged with a knife. Silas sidestepped, grabbed the man's wrist, and used his momentum to send him over the edge. The scream lasted 3 seconds before cutting off abruptly. Then Silas was on his knees, hand pressed to his side, feeling hot blood pulse between his fingers. An arrow hissed past his ear, and he looked up to see Sister Abigail on a lower ledge, bow in hand. She had just saved his life. Again. Down in the canyon, Vincent Blackwood screamed orders at his remaining men. Of 15 riders, only 6 were still alive and capable of fighting. The rest were dead or dying, crushed by rocks or shot from the cliffs. "Fall back," Blackwood roared. "Fall back!" Silas forced himself to stand, found his rifle, reloaded it with shaking hands. Blackwood was retreating on his gray horse 50 yards away and gaining distance. Too far for a normal shot. But Silas had been shooting in these mountains for 12 years, knew how altitude affected bullet trajectory, knew how to read wind. He raised the rifle, exhaled slowly, whispered a single word. "Hannah," he fired. The bullet caught Vincent Blackwood between the shoulder blades. The outlaw pitched forward in his saddle, hung there for a moment like a puppet with cut strings, then slid sideways and fell. He did not move again. The remaining outlaws fled at a gallop, leaving their dead where they lay. The battle was over. Silas sat down heavily, his back against stone. The pain in his ribs was spreading hot and insistent. He looked down and saw his shirt dark with blood. Sister Abigail reached him first. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands already reaching for the wound. "Don't you die," she commanded, her voice breaking. "Don't you dare die on me now." Silas tried to smile. "Did we save them, Ja?" "Yes, you saved us." "Good," he said. Then his vision grayed at the edges and he knew nothing more. Silas woke to pain that felt like someone had driven a hot poker between his ribs and left it there to smolder. His mouth was dry as sand and tasted of copper. When he tried to move, agony lanced through his entire left side, stealing his breath. A cool hand pressed against his forehead. Sister Abigail's face swam into focus above him, her features tight with concentration. "Don't move," she said. "The bullet went clean through, but you lost a lot of blood." He was in one of the shelters, lying on a pallet of pine boughs, covered with what felt like every blanket in the camp. The air smelled of sage smoke and something sharper. Medicine, probably. Sister Martha's herbs. "How long?" Silas rasped. 2 days. You've been in and out of fever." She lifted his head and brought a clay cup to his lips, water cool and sweet. He drank greedily until she pulled it away. Slowly. "Your stomach won't hold much yet." She set the cup aside and began unwrapping the bandages around his torso. The cloth stuck to the wound, making him hiss through his teeth as she peeled it away. "I'm sorry," she said, but her hands did not stop their work. The wound was an angry red pucker on his left side just above his hip. The exit wound on his back was larger, uglier. Sister Abigail cleaned both with a cloth soaked in something that burned like hellfire. "The others," Silas managed. "Sister Beatrice took a bullet in the chest. She died before we could get her down from the cliff." Sister Abigail's voice was flat, controlled. "2 of the groundskeepers died as well, but the children are safe. Everyone else will live. Blackwood, dead. You shot him in the spine. He died before he hit the ground." She met his eyes. "Thank you for that." She applied fresh bandages with practiced efficiency. When she was done, she sat back on her heels and looked at him properly for the first time. "You ran through gunfire to protect the children," she said quietly. "You took a bullet meant for them." "Why?" Silas closed his eyes. The exhaustion was pulling at him like an undertow. "Because they're children. Because I've already got too much blood on my hands. Because I had to do something right. You could have run, could have escaped during the fight. No one would have stopped you." "Where would I go?" Sister Abigail's expression was unreadable. "You're not what I thought you were." "I'm exactly what you thought, a man who enabled murder. That hasn't changed." "No, but you're also the man who saved us. Both things are true." She stood, picking up the basin of bloody water. "Mother Ruth wants to speak with you when you are strong enough. She says your debt is paid." "Paid? You shed blood defending us. By our law, that means redemption." Sister Abigail moved toward the door, then paused. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Silas Brennan. I don't know if Hannah would want me to, but I can't kill you either. You've made that impossible." She left him alone with the pain and the confusion and the strange feeling that something fundamental had shifted between them. For 3 more days, Silas drifted in and out of consciousness. The fever came in waves, burning through him like wildfire. In his delirium, he saw Margaret's face and Hannah's face and the faces of children burning. He heard himself crying out apologies in a voice he did not recognize. And through it all, Sister Abigail was there. She changed his bandages and forced broth between his lips. She wiped the sweat from his face when the fever spiked and piled blankets on him when he shook with chills. She sat beside him in the dark hours before dawn and sang songs in Latin that he did not understand but found strangely comforting. On the 4th day, the fever broke. He woke to find her asleep in a chair beside his pallet, her head tipped back against the wall at an angle that would leave her neck screaming when she woke. Her face in sleep looked younger, the lines of anger and grief smoothed away. She looked like what she was. A woman not yet 30 who had been forced by violence to become something harder than she was ever meant to be. Silas watched her sleep and felt something twist in his chest that had nothing to do with the bullet wound. When Shiwagan found him watching, she did not look away. "You're better," she said. "I'm alive. Not sure that's the same thing." "It's close enough." She stood and stretched, wincing as her spine popped. "Mother Ruth will want to see you today. Can you walk?" "I can try." With Sister Abigail's help, he made it to his feet. The world tilted and spun, but eventually settled. Each step was an exercise in controlled agony, but he could do it. They walked slowly across the camp to Mother Ruth's shelter. The old woman was sitting outside her walking stick, resting against her knee, her eyes on the mountains to the south. "Sit, Silas Brennan," she said without turning to look at him. He lowered himself carefully onto a flat rock. Sister Abigail remained standing behind him, close enough that he could feel the heat of her presence. "You saved our community," Mother Ruth said. "You fought when you could have fled. You took wounds meant for our children. By any measure, your debt is paid." "I don't think debt like mine can be paid, Mother Ruth." "Perhaps not entirely, but you have done what could be done. You have given your strength and your blood in defense of those you once helped to harm. That is redemption, imperfect though it may be." She turned to look at him then, and he saw tears on her weathered cheeks. "You are free to go, Silas Brennan. Free to return to your mountains in your solitary life. We will give you supplies and a horse and our gratitude. You owe us nothing more." Silas looked at the camp, at the children playing near the stream, at Sister Martha tending the smokehouse, and Thomas checking trap lines. At Sister Abigail standing behind him, her shadow falling across his shoulders. "What if I don't want to go?" he asked quietly. Mother Ruth smiled. "Then we will discuss what comes next." But what came next was not what any of them expected. The riders appeared at the canyon entrance on a cold morning 2 weeks after the battle. But these were not outlaws. They wore the blue uniforms of the United States Cavalry and rode in a disciplined column of twos. Leading them was a man in a dark suit and flat-brimmed hat. A silver star gleamed on his chest. U.S. Marshal. The camp erupted into controlled panic. The children were herded into the cave. The nuns grabbed their rifles and took defensive positions. But the marshal raised his hand in a gesture of peace. "Hold your fire," he called. "We're not here to make war. I'm Marshal William Clayton out of Denver. I'm investigating reports of violence in these mountains." Mother Ruth stepped forward, leaning on her walking stick. "What violence would that be, Marshal?" "Multiple deaths, burned buildings, witness reports of an armed confrontation that left 15 men dead in a canyon." Clayton's eyes swept the camp, taking in the defensive positions and the armed women. "This canyon, if I'm not mistaken. Those men attacked us. We defended ourselves." "That may be, but among the dead was Vincent Blackwood, wanted for bank robbery and murder in 3 territories. There's also the matter of a man matching the description of Silas Brennan, wanted for questioning in the attack on the convent of St. Catherine." Silas stood slowly. Every eye in the camp turned to him. "I'm Brennan," he said. Marshal Clayton studied him. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and armed robbery. You'll come back to Denver to stand trial." "No," Sister Abigail said. She stepped between Silas and the marshal, her rifle held at the ready. "He stays with us." "Sister, I don't want trouble with the church, but this man is wanted by federal law. This man saved our lives. He's under our protection." Clayton looked at her, then at the other nuns, who were moving to form a wall between Silas and the marshal. He sighed. "You're going to shoot a federal marshal over this man." "If we have to," Sister Abigail said. Her voice was steady as stone. The marshal sat in his saddle for a long moment, weighing his options. Then he dismounted and gestured for his men to stay back. "Let me speak with your leader. Alone. Maybe we can find a solution that doesn't end with good people getting shot." Mother Ruth led him into her shelter. They were inside for nearly an hour while the camp waited in tense silence. When they emerged, Mother Ruth's face was grave. "Marshal Clayton has made us an offer," she announced. "We cannot stay here. The valley is known now. The law will come. Other outlaws will come looking for Blackwood's gold." "We don't have any gold," Sister Martha protested. "They don't know that, and we cannot defend this place indefinitely." Mother Ruth looked around at her flock. "The marshal suggests we relocate to Mexico. There are Catholic missions there that will take us in. The United States has no jurisdiction across the border." "And Silas?" Sister Abigail asked. "If Brennan leaves U.S. territory and never returns—" "I didn't find him," Clayton said. "That's the deal. You take your community south, and this man goes with you as your protector. I write in my report that I found an empty camp and evidence of a battle, but no survivors." "You would lie in an official report?" Mother Ruth asked. "I would write what I saw. An empty camp. Can't arrest ghosts." Clayton looked at Silas. "But if I ever see you north of the Rio Grande again, Brendan, I'll hang you myself. Understand?" "I understand." "Then you have 48 hours. After that, I'm bringing troops to secure this area. Anyone still here becomes a federal problem." The marshal and his men rode out, leaving behind a camp in turmoil. The debate raged for hours. Stay and face the law. Flee to an uncertain future in a foreign land. But in the end, there was no real choice. Winter was coming. Their position was compromised. And the memory of what had happened at the convent was too fresh. They could not risk it happening again. They would run. The exodus began at dawn on a morning so cold that ice rimmed the edges of the stream. 32 people, 6 horses, 2 mules, and everything they could carry on their backs. Silas, still weak from his wound, walked at the head of the column. Sister Abigail walked beside him, her rifle slung across her shoulders. Behind them came the children, the nuns, the old groundskeepers. A ragged line of refugees fleeing into the unknown. The first week was brutal. They followed game trails through country so remote that even Silas had rarely ventured into it. The path climbed to 11,000 feet, where the air was so thin that even breathing was work. The children struggled. Little Mary had to be carried for hours at a time, and Silas took his turns despite the protest of his healing ribs. At night, they huddled in whatever shelter they could find. Caves, overhangs, once a stand of pines so thick their branches formed a natural roof. They dared not light large fires for fear of attracting attention, so they froze and tried to sleep and rose with the sun to walk again. Sister Abigail walked beside Silas day after day, and slowly they began to talk. "Why did you really stay?" she asked one evening as they sat watching the sunset paint the peaks gold and crimson. "I told you. Where else would I go? You could have gone anywhere, back to your cabin, started fresh somewhere new, but you chose this." She gestured at the exhausted people around them. "Why?" Silas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Margaret, my first wife used to say that a man is defined by what he's willing to suffer for. I spent 12 years willing to suffer for nothing but my own grief. When I found you, I found something worth suffering for again. We're not your family. Aren't you?" He looked at her. "I've bled for you, worked for you, prayed for you, even though I don't believe in prayer." "If that's not family, what is?" Sister Abigail's throat worked. "I can't be what you need me to be. I'm a nun, or I was, or I don't know what I am anymore. I'm not asking you to be anything. I'm just asking to walk beside you until the road ends." She did not answer. But that night, when the cold was bitter and sleep would not come, she sat close enough to Silas that their shoulders touched. It was not much, but it was something. The water crisis hit in the second week. They had descended from the high peaks into a basin of alkali flats, a white expanse of salt and dust that stretched to the horizon. The water they carried ran out after 2 days. The springs marked on Silas's maps had dried to cracked mud. The children stopped crying because they had no moisture left for tears. The adults moved like sleepwalkers, their lips cracked and bleeding. The horses hung their heads and stumbled. Silas scanned the horizon with eyes that burned from dust and sun, looking for any sign, any hope. He found it in a line of scraggly willows barely visible in the distance. There, he croaked, pointing. Water. They covered the last 10 miles in a daze of suffering. When they reached the willows, Silas dug with his bare hands into the mud beneath. 4 feet down, water began to seep into the hole, muddy brown and more beautiful than any clear stream. They drank through straining claws, filtering out the worst of the sediment. It tasted like earth and minerals and life. That night, they camped in the willow thicket, and Sister Abigail found Silas sitting apart from the others, staring at his hands. They were caked with dried mud and blood from digging. "You saved us again," she said, sitting beside him. "Just knew where to look." "No, you knew because you listened. You listened to the land, and it told you where to find water." She was quiet for a moment. "Will you teach me to listen like that?" "Why?" "Because I want to understand what you hear. I want to understand how you became the man you are." So he taught her how to read the shape of the clouds and the flight of birds, how to smell rain on the wind before it arrived, how to find water in the desert by watching where insects gathered. And she taught him in return, taught him prayers that were not about asking for things, but about being grateful for what you had, taught him to find stillness in the center of suffering, taught him that strength and gentleness were not opposites, but partners. Day by day, mile by mile, they were teaching each other how to be whole. Death came for Sister Constance in the 3rd week. The old nun who had been failing for days simply did not wake one morning. She died in her sleep with a faint smile on her lips, and they buried her under a cairn of stones in a dry wash. Mother Ruth said the prayers for the dead while the wind moaned through the rocks. Silas carved a cross from juniper wood using skills learned in a lifetime of solitary living. When he planted it at the head of the grave, Sister Abigail whispered, "You make beautiful things for people you never knew." "I make them for you," Silas said, "because what you love matters to me." 2 days later, a rattlesnake hidden in the morning shade struck Sister Beatrice's niece, a girl of 14. The venom moved fast. By nightfall, her leg was black and swollen. By dawn, she was gone. They had no time to grieve properly. The trackers, they had been evading a group of bounty hunters who had heard about Blackwood's death and come looking for easy pickings, were closing in. Silas could see their dust on the horizon. "We have to move," he said. "If we stop to mourn, we die." They left the girl under stones and moved on, carrying grief like stones in their pockets. The Rio Grande was the final test. They reached it in late afternoon of a day in early December. The river was swollen with snowmelt from the mountains running brown and fast and angry. It was perhaps 60 feet across, and God only knew how deep. On the far side was Mexico. Safety, sanctuary. Between here and there was death by drowning. "We can't cross that," Sister Judith said, her voice shaking. "We'll be swept away." "We don't have a choice," Silas said. He pointed back the way they had come. "The hunters will be here by tomorrow. If we're still on this side, they'll kill us all." He studied the river, reading the current and the depth, found a place where a fallen cottonwood had created a partial break in the flow. "We use rope," he said. "Form a human chain. Strong people on the outside, children, and weak in the middle. We go together or not at all." They tied themselves together with every rope they had. Silas went first, wading into the current. The water was shockingly cold, so cold it made his healing wound scream in protest. The current grabbed at his legs, trying to sweep him downstream. He reached the fallen tree and grabbed hold, bracing himself. "Next," he shouted. Sister Martha came then, Sister Abigail, then the children one by one. They formed a human chain, each person holding the next, fighting the current together. They were halfway across when disaster struck. Sister Judith, carrying one of the youngest children, lost her footing. The current took her instantly. She went under, came up gasping, the child held above her head, even as she drowned. Silas let go of the tree. He dove into the current, swimming hard against the flow. He reached Sister Judith as she went under a second time, grabbed her collar with one hand and the child with the other. The current was too strong. It carried them downstream, tumbling over rocks. Silas kept his grip on both of them, even as he felt his ribs tear open again, even as water filled his lungs and stars burst behind his eyes. His boot hit something solid, a submerged log. He hooked his leg around it and held on with everything he had. Sister Abigail and Sister Martha were already in the water swimming toward him. They formed a living chain, pulling Judith and the child toward the far bank where the current was weaker. They made it to the shallows and collapsed in the mud, coughing up river water and gasping for air. Sister Judith was alive. The child was alive. But Silas's wound had torn open. Blood mixed with river water, turning the mud around him pink. Sister Abigail knelt beside him, her hands pressing against the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. "You're the stupidest brave man I've ever known," she said. Her voice was shaking. "Had to," Silas gasped. "Couldn't let them die." "You almost died yourself." He looked up at her. Her hair had come loose from its pins and hung in wet ropes around her face. Her habit was torn and muddy. She had never looked more beautiful. "Would have been worth it," he said. Something broke in her face. She leaned down and pressed her forehead to his. "Don't you dare die. Don't you leave me now that I've finally figured out you're worth keeping." The rest of the group reached the Mexican side over the next hour. When everyone was across, when they had counted heads and found all accounted for, Mother Ruth raised her walking stick to the sky. "We are through," she announced. "We have crossed over. We are free." They camped on the riverbank that night, too exhausted to move further. In the morning they would find the mission Father Joaquin had told them about. But tonight they simply rested, grateful to be alive. Silas woke in the pre-dawn darkness to find Sister Abigail sitting beside him, keeping watch while he slept. "You should rest," he said. "Can't. Too much to think about." "Like what?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Like how I've spent 2 months hating you and the last month realizing I don't hate you at all. Like how I took vows to God, but I can't stop thinking about a man. Like how everything I thought I knew about right and wrong has been turned upside down." Silas pushed himself up on one elbow, ignoring the pain. "What do you want, Abigail?" "I don't know. That's the problem." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting starlight. "What do you want?" "I want to wake up every morning and see your face. I want to work beside you and argue with you and make you laugh. I want to build something good in a world that's mostly broken, and I want to do it with you. I'm a nun. You're a woman who's worn a habit. There's a difference, and you haven't taken your final vows. You still have a choice. And what if I choose wrong? Then we figure it out together. But choosing nothing because you're afraid of choosing wrong is just another way of giving up." Sister Abigail reached out and took his hand. It was the first time she had touched him with something other than medical necessity or restraint. "I'm terrified," she whispered. "Good. Me too. Means it matters." Mission San Felipe sat in a valley between two ridges of the Sierra Madre 5 miles south of the Rio Grande. It was a collection of adobe buildings surrounding a small chapel with a wooden cross on top. 50 people lived there, a mix of Mexican Catholics and Apache who had converted and fled the wars in the north. Father Joaquin met them at the gate, a priest so old his face looked like a dried apple, but his eyes were kind. "Welcome," he said in accented English. "You are the nuns from Colorado. Yes, we have been praying for your arrival." Mother Ruth nearly wept. "You knew we were coming." "A traitor brought word. He said refugees were heading south. We prepared a place." He showed them to a cluster of buildings that had been empty, cleaned, and stocked with basic supplies. It was not much, but after 2 months of sleeping on the ground, it felt like a palace. "There is land 5 miles south," Father Joaquin said. "Good soil, a spring. You can build your new convent there if you wish." "We wish," Mother Ruth said, "and we are grateful beyond words." Father Joaquin turned to Silas. "And you, mountain man, what will you do?" It was the question Silas had been avoiding. Now it hung in the air, demanding an answer. "I don't know," he admitted. "I'll help them build. After that," he shrugged. The old priest smiled. "In my experience, God rarely tells us what comes after. He just asks us to be faithful in the present moment." The first month in Mexico was a blur of construction. They built with adobe, mixing mud and straw and forming bricks that dried hard as stone in the Mexican sun. Silas worked 16-hour days, his body finding old rhythms of labor. But this time it was different. This time he was building, not atoning, creating, not destroying. Sister Abigail worked beside him, her hands learning the feel of mud and straw. They did not speak much during the work, did not need to, but their silences were comfortable now, the silences of two people who had learned each other's rhythms. At night after the work was done, she would find him and they would walk together in the cooling dark, talking about nothing and everything, about the past and the future and the strange present they inhabited. One night she asked him about Margaret. "Do you still love her?" "Yes," Silas said honestly. "I'll always love her, but loving her doesn't mean I can't love someone else. The heart's bigger than we think." "And do you love someone else?" He stopped walking and turned to face her. "I love you, Abigail. I've loved you since the day you gave me that second bowl of soup and pretended it was nothing. I've loved you since you shot a man to save my life. I've loved you through every step of this long walk south, and I'll love you until I stop breathing." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face in the moonlight. "I haven't taken final vows. I could leave the order." "I know. But if I do, it can't be for you. It has to be for me, because I choose it." "I know that too. I'm so tired of being afraid," she whispered. "Tired of living in the bed. Tired of punishing myself for surviving when Hannah didn't." Silas took her hands in his. "Then stop. Choose to live. Choose to be happy. Choose me if you want, but choose yourself first." She looked at him for a long moment, and he saw something shift in her face. A decision being made. A door being opened. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tomorrow I'll speak to Mother Ruth." The next morning, Sister Abigail requested a private audience with the Mother Superior. They walked together to the small chapel and spoke for over an hour. When they emerged, Sister Abigail's eyes were red but peaceful. "I've released my novice vows," she said to the assembled community. "I choose to serve God in a different way, as a teacher, as a helper, as a woman, but not as a nun." Sister Martha embraced her. Sister Judith wept but smiled. Mother Ruth simply nodded, as if she had known this was coming all along. "You are still our sister," Mother Ruth said. "Vows or no vows, you are family." 3 months after they arrived in Mexico, the new convent was finished. It was small but solid, with thick adobe walls and a roof of red tiles. A place where women could pray and children could learn and refugees could find shelter. The day after the last brick was laid, Mother Ruth summoned Silas. "Your work is complete," she said. "You have built us a home. You have protected us on the road. You have given more than we had any right to ask." She placed a small leather pouch in his hand. "This is $200 in gold, the same amount you took from Blackwood. Use it for good." Silas stared at the pouch. "This is blood money." "It was. You've purified it through service. Now it's just money. Use it to start your new life." "What if I don't want a new life? What if I want this one?" Mother Ruth smiled. "Then I have a question for you. Do you love Abigail?" "Yes. Enough to marry her, to build a home with her, to spend your days working to make this community strong?" "Yes." "Then ask her. She's been waiting for you to find the courage." He found Abigail in the garden. She had started planting seeds in neat rows. She looked up when his shadow fell across her. "I'm leaving," he said. Her face went pale. "What?" "Mother Ruth gave me my freedom, said my debt is paid and I can go anywhere I want." He knelt beside her in the dirt. "But there's nowhere I want to go. Everything I want is right here." "Silas, I'm asking to stay, not as a worker, not as a guard, as a partner, as your husband if you'll have me. I want to build a life here with you, helping these people build their lives. I want to plant gardens and teach children and grow old watching sunsets over these mountains. I want all of it, but only if you want it too." Abigail was crying again, but this time she was smiling through the tears. She pulled off the simple white coif she still wore, the last remnant of her habit, and let it fall to the ground. "Yes," she said. "Yes to all of it. Yes to you." He kissed her there in the dirt among the seeds she had planted, and it tasted like salt and tears and the beginning of something new. They were married by Father Joaquin in the chapel of Mission San Felipe on a spring morning when the desert was covered in wildflowers. The entire community attended. Little Mary, who had finally begun to speak again, served as flower girl. Thomas stood up with Silas as a witness. When Father Joaquin asked if anyone objected to the union, Mother Ruth stood. Everyone held their breath. "I object," she said. Then she smiled. "I object to the fact that it took you both so long to admit what everyone else could see. Now get on with it." The chapel erupted in laughter. Silas and Abigail built a small adobe house on the edge of the mission lands. One room to start with plans to add more as needed. It was not much, but it was theirs. Abigail planted a garden. The same flowers her sister Hannah had loved. Forget-me-nots for remembrance. Columbine for courage. This time in the rich Mexican soil with plenty of water they grew. Silas worked as a hunter and protector for the mission, bringing in game and keeping watch for bandits. But he also taught the children to track and to read the weather, taught the adults to build and to survive. And at night he came home to Abigail, and they would sit on their porch and watch the sun set over the mountains and talk about their day. It was a simple life, a good life. They never had children of their own. Abigail had been injured during the attack on the convent in ways that made bearing children impossible. But they helped raise the orphans who came to the mission, taught them, fed them, loved them. Little Mary lived with them for 5 years until she was old enough to choose her own path. She became a teacher just like Hannah had wanted to be. Thomas became a scout like Silas, using his skills to guide settlers and protect the vulnerable. The children they helped raise grew up and had children of their own, and those children called Silas and Abigail Grandma and Grandpa, even though there was no blood relation. 20 years passed, then 30. In 1888, Mother Ruth died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 90. They buried her in the mission cemetery with a marker that read, "She led her flock through the wilderness and brought them home." Silas was 52 when they got word that his daughter from Margaret, a daughter he had not known existed, had been found living with a family in Montana. Margaret had been pregnant when she died, but the child had survived. A rancher and his wife had taken the baby in and raised her as their own. Silas and Abigail traveled north to meet him. She was a grown woman with children of her own, and she welcomed the father she had never known with grace and kindness. One of her sons was named Joshua. The Montana plains in 1890 were gentler than the Colorado mountains had been. But Silas still saw the high peaks in his dreams. He was 64 now, his hair white, his body marked by a lifetime of hard use. But his eyes were still clear, and his hands were still strong. He sat on the porch and watched Joshua finish packing. Tomorrow the boy would leave for seminary. Today he needed to hear the end of the story. "So you stayed," Joshua said. "You chose to stay with Sister Abigail even though you were free to go." "I stayed because I finally understood something," Silas said. "Freedom isn't about going wherever you want. It's about choosing to be exactly where you need to be." "But you had done terrible things. How did you live with that?" "By not trying to erase it, by building something good on top of the ruins." Silas pulled an old photograph from his pocket. It showed him and Abigail surrounded by 20 children of various ages, all smiling, all safe. "This doesn't erase the children who died in that fire. Nothing can, but it adds more light to the world. And sometimes that's the best we can do." Joshua looked at the photograph. "Is grandmother happy? In this life you chose?" "You'll have to ask her yourself. She's inside making supper." Silas smiled. "But I think she is. We built something together. Something that matters. And we did it by choosing each other every single day. Even on the hard days. Especially on the hard days." Joshua stood and embraced his grandfather. "Thank you for telling me. I understand now why you wanted me to hear it. Do you understand that guilt doesn't have to destroy you, that you can carry the weight of what you've done and still build something beautiful?" "I'm starting to." "Good, because Emily's death wasn't your fault, Joshua. You didn't push her in that river. You were just a boy who froze in fear. But you have a choice now. You can carry that guilt forever. Let it poison everything good in your life. Or you can use it. Let it teach you compassion. Let it drive you to help others. Let it make you into the kind of priest who understands broken people because you've been broken yourself." Joshua's eyes were wet. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You are. And when you're not, God will be. That's what faith is." The boy left in the morning, heading for Denver in the seminary and a life of service. Silas watched him go and felt the satisfaction of a circle closing. That evening, Abigail came out to sit beside him on the porch. She was 60 now, her hair streaked with silver, her face lined by 60 years of laughter and tears. She was still the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Did you tell him everything?" she asked. "Everything that mattered in? Even the part about how you're a stubborn fool who nearly died 3 times before you figured out you loved me? Especially that part." She laughed and took his hand. They sat in comfortable silence as the sunset painting the Montana sky in shades of gold and amber. "Do you have any regrets?" Abigail asked. Silas thought about Margaret and the map he had drawn and the children who had died, thought about the long walk south and the river crossing and every hard mile in between. "I regret what I did to bring us together," he said. "I'll regret that until I die, but I don't regret where we ended up. I don't regret you." "Good," she said, "because I don't regret you either." They sat until the stars came out, until the coyotes began to sing in the distance, until the world was dark and quiet and perfect. And when Silas Brennan finally closed his eyes to sleep that night, for the first time in 32 years, he did not dream of fire. He dreamed of wildflowers growing in the desert and a woman's hand in his and the sound of children laughing in the distance. He dreamed of redemption.